The growing row over grammar schools as the government backs more selection in England. Labour claims the schools will cause more inequality, but ministers believe they can play a role.
There'll be no return to the simplistic binary choice of the past where schools separate children into winners and losers, successes or failures.
Also tonight, world records and golden smiles. The Paralympics get underway in Brazil.
No more than a sticking plaster. Critics slam new investment in flood defences.
And Parliament's grand design, the £4 billion plan to renovate the Palace of Westminster.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
Good evening. The government has been forced to defend its controversial and as yet unpublished plans to bring back grammar school-style education. Labour said the Prime Minister had let the cat out of the bag last night by telling her MPs she wanted an element of selection in England's schools.
Today, the Education Secretary insisted the government only wants to offer parents better choice and says it's not about creating winners and losers. But others feel it will do exactly that and further deny opportunity to the very poorest. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
We all went to school somewhere. For Theresa May, it was a grammar school. A comprehensive educated the Chancellor, Philip Hammond. In fact, there are more state-educated ministers in the current cabinet than at any time since 1945. And Mrs May is expected to pause her Brexit planning, which she discussed with Donald Tusk this morning, to announce her first big domestic policy, allowing more grammar schools to open. But even before the policy was announced, the Education Secretary, who went to a comp, had to defend it.
Too often in Britain we do have selection, but it's on the basis of house prices, which is totally unacceptable in a modern Britain. We need to challenge ourselves to talk about how we can change that and improve standards for children wherever they are in our country.
But Labour are fundamentally opposed to schools which select pupils on the basis of academic achievement.
This policy will not help social mobility, Mr Speaker, but will entrench inequality and disadvantage. It will be the lucky few who can afford the tuition who will get ahead, and the disadvantage that will be left behind. A policy for the few at the expense of the many.
Labour tried to abolish grammars in the mid-60s because the kids who didn't get in often ended up in fairly ropey secondary moderns, and not all Conservatives support them either. But even trickier than getting this through the House of Commons will be getting it through the House of Lords, where the government does not have a majority and where opposition peers will be emboldened by the fact that grammar schools were not in the Conservative manifesto. So it's expected the new grammar proposals will prioritise disadvantaged pupils. Exams would be tutor-proofed where possible to protect those who can't afford private tuition, and alternative schools for non-grammar pupils will have to be of high quality. The government's own social mobility czar says the current grammar model won't work.
It will be a social mobility disaster. Typically, in a grammar school today, there are 4 times as many pupils who've been to a private prep school than come from a low-income family.
So this could be quite a fight, as education is an emotive issue, one in which everyone has an opinion because we all went to school somewhere. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
So how would such a scheme work in practice? Some grammar schools are already taking steps to try to attract pupils from a more diverse background. In Birmingham, 20% of places are offered to those from less privileged families. Ben Chapman heard the views of parents and teachers on both sides of this debate.
As we develop and as we get more confident, we'll set you more challenging targets.
These new grammar school pupils are used to high expectations. Each passed an exam just to be here. And yet 1 in 5 of them is from a poor background, enough to qualify for a free school meal. That's because for only the second time, this and 4 other grammar schools in Birmingham made it easier for those children to get in.
I think it's improved the diversity of the school. It reflects the city of Birmingham, and it allows the opportunity to access the success of this education to everyone.
It challenges critics who say only rich parents can afford private tuition to help pass the entrance exam. But in a city where more than a third of pupils qualify for free school meals, only 150 will get a place. But parents at a local primary school say they support grammar schools if it's a level playing field.
It's not fair if it's just people with money, their children get a better education.
I didn't do that good at school myself, so how am I supposed to help him?
Money talks, and you know, a lot of people get in through the money if they've got the money.
But a report this week found school selection effectively already exists based on house prices. Those close to good schools cost 74% more than those further away. Around England's top 30 schools, the average price is more than £360,000, more than £50,000 more than elsewhere. But the head at this local comprehensive says grammars aren't the answer.
When you take the most able out of all comprehensives, it's going to have some impact. Surely it is. It won't raise standards. Pupils need other pupils to aspire to be like them.
As many as 70 grammar schools are now considering policies to widen access like this one. But the most controversial issue remains whether the brightest pupils should be separated at such a young age. Ben Chapman, ITV News, Birmingham.
And our political editor, Robert Peston, is in Westminster for us now. And Robert, this is going to be Theresa May's first major policy announcement tomorrow. She could have hardly chosen, could she, a more divisive one?
No, that is absolutely right. Why is she doing it? Well, it's partly because her big message since becoming Prime Minister, she wants to help social mobility, and she's announcing a wide package of education reforms, of which this is one element, which she hopes will be seen as helping the least advantaged. But actually, this issue of divisiveness isn't the whole story. Within the Tory party, it's fantastically unifying. I've been talking to Tory MPs today, and they love the abolition of the prohibition on the creation of new grammar schools. And they're up for a fight with Labour, which has also been unified by this announcement because they hate grammar schools. We are therefore going to see a punch-up in the Commons. Theresa May can expect to win that particular battle because on this she will have a majority, in particular because the Scottish National Party won't really have a say. This is an England and Wales issue. However, I simply don't see how she gets this through the Lords. The Lords doesn't see a majority for the Tories. I think this is a policy which will be hugely controversial, and I suspect in the period of consultation will be massively watered down.
OK, Robert Peston at Westminster, thank you.
Now, after last night's spectacular opening ceremony, and it really was quite something, the Paralympics are well underway in Brazil, with Britain already well placed for early gold medals. 3 of our cyclists have broken world records in qualifying ahead of their finals tonight.
Yes, they include Dame Sarah Storey, who's aiming to become Britain's greatest female Paralympian. Richard Pallow reports from Rio on the first day of the Paralympics.
It took a couple of days to win our first Olympic gold. There seems little doubt now tonight that our Paralympians will outdo them. 2 golds look odds-on to come in the pool. Bethany Firth smashing her own world record in the heats of the S14 100 metres backstroke. Also starting favourite will be Ollie Hind, qualifying quickest by 7 seconds in the S8 400 metres free. British flags are set to get a very early outing this evening.
All set up nicely for tonight. To be awarded.
The first gold of the Games came in athletics and went to Kenya in the men's 5,000 metres. The country's long-distance runners seemingly still in as good a shape as ever. The crowd watching that was reasonably small. It was not for the opening ceremony. A sellout, a celebration of samba, and a reminder of just what can be achieved.
Great Britain!
Paralympics GB were led in by dressage rider Lee Pearson. A chance for the team to party before all the serious stuff, and cheered on by family and friends watching at British House on the other side of the city. The spirit of the Games was perhaps best summed up by what happened to Marcia Malsar. The whole crowd rising to applaud the former Paralympian, after she had slipped on a rain-soaked floor while carrying the torch. Undaunted, she continued, and the cauldron was lit. But that drama was matched every bit of the way by events in the men's T11 long jump. With his final effort, Ricardo Costa de Oliveira leapt his way into Brazilian hearts. The host's first gold in the bag before the first afternoon was even over.
So, Richard, all eyes and not a little pressure on Sarah Story tonight.
Well, yes, pressure, but Sarah Story is pretty impervious to pressure, as we've seen over the last few games. If she wins tonight, she becomes the most successful ever female Paralympian, British Paralympian that is, a 12th gold medal, and she absolutely obliterated her own world record in the heats. So I think there's every chance she will do it, and actually we're guaranteed our first gold because in the final she will face another Briton in Crystal Lane. And aside from that, two other cyclists, Megan Giglia and Steve Bate, they both qualified quickest in their heats, both smashed their world records. Their finals are also tonight in the Velodrome. And when you add in the swimming chances later this evening, I think there is every chance that Paralympics GB may well be top of the medal table come the end of day one.
All right, Richard, thanks very much indeed.
Two men have been arrested on suspicion of terror offences. Officers from Scotland Yard detained the 19 and 20-year-olds in West London this morning as part of a pre-planned anti-terror operation. The youngest is accused of preparing for acts of terror. A number of other addresses and vehicles have also been searched in the capital today.
A government review into last year's devastating floods has been condemned as promising little more than a sticking plaster to prevent it happening again.
£12.5 million has been pledged to new temporary flood defences in England, but critics say it will not protect homes and businesses. Damon Green has been back to Mytholroyd in West Yorkshire, which was badly hit in storms last Christmas.
In this town in West Yorkshire, the damage caused by the Boxing Day floods is still visible. The repair work is still underway.
The water came up to this here, inside. On the outside, it was up here, looking out.
Roger never left his home by the banks of the River Calder, even while the River Calder was running through his living room. But every repair he's made has been made with a next flood in mind, because he's convinced it wasn't the last.
It will happen again. It's when. It's more likely than not. There will be another flood. It's to what degree? It could be worse.
The Boxing Day floods were the worst anyone in Mytholroyd had ever seen. The waters may have subsided for now, but the Calder Valley, like other parts of the country, needs to be ready. The new measures announced today include a supply of portable defences, such as temporary barriers and high-volume water pumps, costing £12.5 million. They'll be stored at 7 locations around England for rapid access. And a new stress test will aim to map out flood risks in England over the next 10 years. This town now has its own flood alleviation scheme costing millions, strengthening river walls, widening bridges, demolishing riverside properties. But some locals say it's a waste of money, while the authorities refuse to listen to their concerns and dredge the riverbeds.
We're on a loser all the way. It's pointless putting bridges in, pulling houses down, building walls 18 inches higher, 500 mil. Why not take 500 mil of the silt that's in there out? We're doing the same thing, aren't we?
Nobody wants to go back to the scenes of Boxing Day 2015, and the government says the billions they've set aside for flood defence will help prevent it. But many who live next to the river, and always have, aren't so sure. Damon Green, ITV News, in West Yorkshire.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, relocation, relocation, relocation. Westminster's solution to its crumbling palace and...
Hi! Hello! How's you? Wow, you look really good. You look good too.
1 year on, the transplant patient returning to the hospital that saved her life. Those stories and more right after the break. Welcome back. MPs were insisting today that a £4 billion scheme to repair the Palace of Westminster was not a vanity project, but rather one that's needed to save it from disaster. Work could start in 2023, and it won't be so much as a 60-minute makeover as a 6-year project. To speed things up, both Houses of Commons and Lords will move out, but there's a big problem already. Experts warn there may not be enough skilled people to do the job. Our political correspondent Paul Brand on plans for the big build.
Outside, the tourists marvel at the mother of all parliaments, but hidden from sight, it houses the mother of all problems. Its walls crumbling with damp, roofs leaking, and asbestos lurking somewhere down here.
And then if you look up here, you see that there's the gas there, gas main, and you'll see it's immediately next to the danger high voltage.
This MP heads up a committee which has decided it is becoming too dangerous.
The risk is, and it's growing year by year, and we've taken far too long to address it, the risk is of some kind of catastrophic failure. If we want to preserve this iconic historic building, we've got to seize the opportunity now.
But the renovation could cost more than £4 billion and take up to 8 years to complete, partly because the oldest bit of the building dates back 900 years, with the rest rebuilt in 1840 after a fire burnt down much of the previous palace. The big question, of course, is where everyone goes while the work's being done, and the answer for MPs is here at Richmond House, the Department of Health. Doesn't look like much from the outside, and there's no bar for them on the inside, but it does have space for a debating chamber. Meanwhile, the Lords get the plusher QE2 conference centre just down the road, as they too insist it is a good use of money.
For all of us who live here, all of us who are taxpayers, we know that we've got to spend money on lots of things that are vital to us. But this is one of those things. I can't say it's more important than something else, but it is equally important.
The decision on Parliament's future will now be put to Parliament itself. MPs and Lords will have a final vote on the plans. Paul Brand, ITV News, Westminster.
Some news just in. West Midlands Police have charged 4 men with terrorism offences. The men, aged between 24 and 37, were arrested last month in Birmingham and Stoke-on-Trent. They will appear before Westminster magistrates tomorrow.
There's been a large rise in the number of workers on 0 hours contracts. The figures from the Office for National Statistics show over 900,000 people now work on a 0 hours basis as their main job. That's a rise of more than 20% since last year.
And an Air China in-flight magazine which advised travellers to London to avoid areas mainly populated by Indian, Pakistani and black people has been withdrawn. The airline says the statement does not represent its official views and has now removed all copies of the magazine from its flights.
And finally tonight, this time last year, we heard from Katie Magnet, who was waiting for a heart donor and was so ill she was living in hospital.
Well, happily for Katie, shortly afterwards she was given a new heart. And today she returned to thank the surgeons who saved her life. Peter Smith was there too.
Hello, stranger. How are you? I'm fine. I can't believe it's been a year.
It's not every day you meet someone who's literally held your heart in their hands.
It's amazing to see her like this today, I have to say.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be face to face with the man who saved your life?
Emotional, but it's emotional coming back here anyway.
This was Katie 1 year ago when a virus suddenly and quickly attacked her heart.
To have this pump put in that was going to give me time with my family, but now I need a heart transplant. Now I'm on the urgent list.
Katie waited day after day in hospital for a donor. Then the call came.
I found out at 7 o'clock this morning that they found me a heart, which is very exciting. I'm very, very nervous, but anyway, we're going to be going down maybe in about 5 minutes, I hope. Don't know if we're going to get my heart, I don't know if it's all going to happen, but just so excited, and thank you, whoever it is.
Katie doesn't know whose heart she received, but she wants their family to know what it means.
Thank you very much to my donor and their family for discussing it and making sure that their wishes were carried out, because it's incredible. It's given me my life. It's given me my children and my husband and my life back. And you can't put into words what that means.
Last year, Katie's son spent his 10th birthday by her hospital bedside. For his 11th, she's healthy and home. She knows she's one of the lucky ones, though, because Britain has one of the lowest rates of organ donor consent in Europe, and the gift she received is still one too few are willing to give. Peter Smith, ITV News, Hertfordshire.
Good grief. If ever there was an advert for organ donation.
That is it. Remarkable story. Katie Magnet, amazing. And that's all for now. Tom Bradby will be here with news at 10.
But from all the Evening News team, have a very good night. Bye-bye.